Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Be She podcast. Be seen, be heard, be empowered. And I am being joined today by an incredible international speaker. Her name is Marcy Amaro, and I'm going to share all the amazing things about her. But before I do, first, let me say hello. Hi, Marcy. How are you? And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited about this conversation.
I am too. And a little side note, I know Marcy from before, so this is not our first rodeo together. It's our first interview together, but it's not our first rodeo. So, and she lives in West Palm Beach. Literally, we live probably less than a mile or two away from each other. So we're going to be doing lunch soon because we tried to do that before. It didn't happen, but we're going to make it happen this time. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so it's just to be an ongoing fun journey. But let's dive into your background, Marcy. I want to share that before we kick off this conversation. So Marcy Amaro is speaking and self-leadership coach and founder of the Igniter series, helps heart-centered, contribution-driven, creative entrepreneurs and business owners rediscover themselves and live integrated lives so they can authentically and confidently create truly fulfilled lives and businesses. Marcy is an international speaker and has been featured on Authority Magazine and many live and virtual stages, including the Puerto Rico Association of Realtors and ASOPYMES, which is the Puerto Rican Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. She has shared the stage with the likes of Dr. Shad Helmstetter, Michael Sorensen, Natasha Miller, Lisa A. Romano, and Dr. Zoe Shaw. She is the host of the Sincerely Speaking podcast, and for her expertise has been featured on the Humane Marketing podcast and Live on Purpose Radio. So thank you again, Marcy, for joining me today. And I have a question to kick us off. Many of the entrepreneurs I working with, our audience is female entrepreneurs, and we're working toward create balance because you're a mom, and I'm a mom, and that's part of the journey of growing a business is really finding that balance, and that's a big challenge for women. So when you started your business as an entrepreneur, before we dive into the balance you created, is this a journey that you had been on yourself, is how you got into doing what you're doing, or did your business look differently when it started, or is this something that you learned in your educational journey?
Well, my business journey, my entrepreneurial journey has been a roller coaster. I did not start my life thinking I was going to be an entrepreneur. I did always have some issues with traditional job environments, and we can get into that later. But I was a teacher for over 25 years, and that's where my education background is from. I was a high school English teacher for about 25, 26 years. But what happened was, as I worked with kids, I started noticing that a lot of the most creative kids, a lot of the most talented kids got to high school thinking that they didn't have anything valuable to offer because they weren't good at the math and the science or the writing essays or the things that they're told they're supposed to be good at. And so their creativity was suppressed, and they grew up thinking that it was nonsense to pursue creative endeavors. It was nonsense for them to think that they could be artists or musicians or writers or all these other wonderful, amazing things that were in their heart to do. And by the time they got to me, they were so broken. They had been so disheartened by the system and led to believe that they were less than they actually were, that I started focusing more on the actual kids, on helping them get over those things. And the English part, the academic part, felt less and less important the more I did the work in helping them get over that. Then I started to think, you know what, I'm spending so much time working on this. I might as well try and figure out how to use this as a business, because this whole education thing, it was starting to affect me. Like, honestly, I was getting physically sick because of the emotional impact of what I was going through in schools. I was losing my hair. My weight was on a roller coaster up and down. I had all these issues because of that. And so I started looking into the possibility. And somehow I ended up connecting with the Realtor Association and the small and medium business associations back in Puerto Rico, where I lived at the time. And I started speaking to them about possibility. about redefining and rediscovering who they are, about letting go of all these constraints that we are put on, that are put upon us because of the programming and the way that we're raised and the way that we're educated. And I started to realize that a lot of the disheartening things that I saw in these teenagers were carried into adulthood, and even successful professionals were struggling with their sense of worth, with their sense of confidence, with tapping into their authenticity, with allowing themselves to be who they're meant to be. And so I started transferring all of this into my chats and my conferences and helping people in different stages, in different ways. And a bunch of iterations later, that we might touch on as we talk, I landed on this idea of, look, self-leadership is what we're missing. We are experiencing such a lack of leadership, such a vacuum of not having powerful, impactful leaders who can really direct our nation and our world in the right way. And it all starts with the fact that we're no longer taught to lead ourselves. We're not taught to take responsibility for the things that we're meant to take responsibility for. We're not taught the things that we can control and how to exercise that control in an effective way. We're not taught that the only thing that we can't change is circumstances, but everything else we can do something about, right? And so we go through life allowing everything and anything else to lead and guide us, and we're drifting through life most of the time without understanding that all it takes is for us to take a stand in our own leadership of our own selves. And so
Mhm.
that's where I am focusing my time and my energy, in helping creative, contribution-driven entrepreneurs who usually lead their lives trying to think of everybody else but themselves, right? But it starts with going back inside, becoming aware of where you need to lead yourself, so that then you're in a position to be a model for others, right?
Wow, that's so good. And thank you. I think it's wonderful that as a teacher, and you really hit home for me with what you just shared as being a teacher and seeing these students come to you broken.
Mhm.
Because I'm a single mom and I have a daughter who is a freshman in high school this year, and she's come from virtual school because she was in and out of the brick and mortar. And she
Mhm.
spent the last year and a half in virtual and now is moving back into brick and mortar. And she's taking responsibility. I'm very proud of her, but she's challenged with as far as keeping like her grades, mate, right?
Mhm.
Because she's catching up, she's in catch up mode, and she feels like she's not a great test taker. And I always want to
Aw.
work with her on the verbiage, like, you're a great test taker and you're very smart. So I think it's amazing and so wonderful that as a teacher you saw these kids and you worked with them on the other side of it, because there's so much emphasis put on grades. And I'll
Right.
admit that I fall into that trap too. I get on them about what's going on with this, because I don't mind the grades is not so much the worry, it's the zeros.
Mhm.
Like, you should not have zeros. Like, that's not okay. Right. So maybe I can chat with you offline on how to
Oh, yeah.
navigate that, because I feel like I'm always on top of them with like checking and going, why are these zeros? So, but yeah, I think there's a lot of emphasis put on grades versus where the meeting the children where they're at. So thank you for just doing that when you were in the system and you were a teacher doing that for the children, because I can only imagine the lives you impacted in that environment. And now you're taking it to working with adults that
Mhm.
are now maybe that need to that want to create some type of impact and difference in their lives and not only other people's lives. um you mentioned leadership, which I think is super important. And I work with entrepreneurs in building their businesses, and I always talk into leadership. And you said a key point, which I don't hear often, because people can talk about leadership, but it starts with self, right?
Mhm.
And we don't have leadership with ourselves, we can't be a leader to others. So
No.
what are some steps that you help people, like, what do you teach the people that you work with? What are some initial steps on, because you mentioned responsibility, which is key in being a leader. A lot of people like to play the blame game, right?
Yep.
Ever gets accomplished with the blame game, right? Creating boundaries is another thing that I heard you say or share into. So what are like, for somebody that's feeling like they're confused or they're wallowing a little bit, like, how can they step into their leadership?
Yeah, I think it's important to start with a distinction in the levels of influence before we talk about how do we start with leadership, because I think there's a big confusion out there in terms of what leadership really means, and it stems from not understanding that there's different levels of influence, and we navigate all levels of influence, especially as parents, right? We go from manipulation all the way up to transformational influence, which is the highest level, right? But when we are looking at most of what is taught out there about leadership, it's more transactional, right? So I give you this, so you give me that, or I make it possible for you to do this so that you do this other thing. And it's a give and take in the relationship, which is more managerial. It's more management than leadership. And I make a distinction between the two, right? When you're managing, you're giving instructions and you're giving guidelines to get to an end result. When you're leading, you're modeling a vision and you're enrolling people into following your vision. And there's a big distinction between the two, right? So when you are managing and you're simply trying to get to an end result, it's enough to go into transaction, right? I give you a paycheck, you do what I tell you to do, and then you move forward, right? But when you are looking to inspire beyond that, and you're looking to be a true leader, then you get into the transformational influence piece. So it all begins, anything in life, I believe, begins with true awareness, with really understanding yourself, where you're at, and what it is that it is in your vision and your calling to do. You cannot be a leader of self or anybody else if you don't have a vision, a destination that you're moving towards. Because if you're endlessly roaming around, I have a mentor that says you can't lead from the middle of the road. And I think that that is so true. Every time I say that, I'm reminded of the fact that you have to have a destination. You have to pick a side. You have to be going somewhere in order for people to follow you. So it begins with true awareness of where you're at. After you are in that clarity piece and you are truly in there, then we go into connection. So we need to connect with other people effectively. And that has several layers, right? That has to do with charisma, that has to do with understanding personalities, that has to do with communication, that has to do with boundaries and responsibility and all these other things. And then finally, we can go into coherence when we're putting all these pieces together so that everything aligns and moves in the same direction, right? So there's different pieces to this, but it all starts, the first step is always becoming really clear, and you're never going to be 100% clear, right? Let's just get that out of the way. So you're never going to be 100% clear, but at least having an understanding of what your intention is and what the ultimate destination is that you're working towards getting.
Yeah, I think that keeps a lot of people stuck, is that clarity piece, because they are afraid to take the wrong step. Right. And I've said it, I think, in a number of podcasts, like action brings clarity. And
Yes.
but we can get stuck on, well, what if I make the wrong choice? Right. What if I make the wrong decision? And no decision's the wrong decision if it's getting you towards closer to getting that clarity.
Yeah.
So how do you direct people that feel stuck like that, or have that fear of making the wrong decision on getting clarity? Because, or if they're like, well, I don't know what my vision is. They've been in clear for so long, they can't even, it's tough for them to open their brain to that concept.
Absolutely. I think that one of the hardest people for especially women to answer is, what do you really want? You ask someone that question and they usually go into what they don't want rather than what they
Yes.
really want.
Yes.
Right? So they start spewing all the things they don't want instead of what they want. And that's why we struggle so much, because whatever you focus on, that's where you direct your life, right? So if you're focusing on all the things you don't want, you are actually directing your life in the direction of what you don't want. It's like when you start skidding in the road, right, in your car, and you start looking at the wall and you're like, don't go to the wall, don't go to the wall, and you hit the wall.
Yeah.
So you need to shift from what you don't want to what you want. The problem is, like you very clearly stated, that most of us are afraid that once we make a decision, because a decision cuts away all other options, right? So that's what we've been taught, that once you make a decision, that means all the other options are cut away. So that leads to FOMO. It's like, okay, so am I going to miss out on something? Is this really the right decision? How do I know if it's the right decision? So one of the first things that I work with people in understanding is that you are not given the ability to always make the right decision, but you are given the ability to make a decision and then make it right. Right?
Oh,
So
that
I'll
is so
say,
good. Can you go back to that again? That is a mic drop.
absolutely. I'll say that again. And I actually first heard this from Andy Andrews, and then I adapted it a little bit. But
I love
you're
it.
not given the ability to always make a right decision. You're given the ability to make a decision and then make it right.
Ooh,
So whatever decision you make, after you make the decision, and there's a process that I walk people through to make the decision, and we can talk briefly about it in a minute, but once you make a decision, where most people go wrong is they allow space to second guess the decision, and they keep themselves going back and forth. I made this decision, but what if I had made this one? I did this, but what about this other thing, right? If we shift that to you made a decision, now your job is to prove to yourself that that was the right decision, to do everything in your power to make the best with that decision and to turn that decision into the right one, and give yourself the time and the space and the grace to work toward and stumble towards, because we're going to stumble, right? Stumble towards making that decision right, then 99% of the time you're going to find that that decision was just fine. It was the difference between focusing on what about all these other options versus focusing on, no, this is the decision I made. How can I prove that this is the right one? What can I do to show that this is the right decision? And then do everything in your power to turn whatever decision that was into the right decision, because that's
Yeah.
within your scope of power and responsibility.
Yeah. And when you were saying all that, I was thinking buyer's remorse. So many of us,
Mm.
so many people get in that caught up in that buyer's remorse. They'll make a purchase and then like, oh, what if I make the wrong decision? What if it's not what and it's like, just trust yourself. And I think, does it fall? Is this true now that we're talking with like just that talking to buyer's remorse and that word trust? Is that what it comes down to, is maybe we really don't trust ourselves enough that we flounder in the decisions that we make?
That is a
Find
big
that?
part of it. That is a big part of it. We don't trust ourselves because you know what? The evidence we have about ourselves is that we're not trustworthy,
Mhm.
right? So when we work on things like confidence and things like trust and things like belief and making decisions and all these things and second guessing and imposter syndrome, usually the underlying element is that we have created so much proof in our own lives that we're not trustworthy, that our brain immediately goes to, but wait, remember those 22,000 million times that you said you would do something and you didn't?
Mhm.
Right? And so there's all this proof that says that we have historically not been trustworthy. But the only way to change that is by starting gathering evidence to the contrary. Yes. So that is the tricky part right there. It's where we have to start ignoring the past evidence and telling our brain, yeah, that's the way it was. Thank you for reminding me, but this is the new me. And I'm going in this direction now. And I'm definitely going to make it happen this time. And I am going to keep going until I get to the end of this road, right? And the other thing to understand is that if we are headed, and I was just talking about this on a live today, if we are headed from here to New York, right? And we get on a plane to go from Florida to New York, that plane is only going to go north in the direction of New York about 50% of the time, if that, usually less. It's going to go east, it's going to go southwest, it's going to go in all different directions before it actually gets us to our destination, right? So the other thing to understand is that in the process of getting to that destination that we decided, the road is not going to be straight. We're not always going to be looking straight at that destination. There's going to be turns and curves and boulders and bridges and all these other things that get in the way. But as long as we know that we're moving in the general direction of where we want to go, then that's fine. It's just a matter of understanding where that general direction is and redirecting when we need to.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good analogy, Marcy. It's so good because it's true. Like when we're looking to get from point A to point B or point A to point B, depending on if you're watching this, and I want you to make sure I'm doing it the right direction. But it's not a straight line. It is never a straight line. And it's really important that we give ourselves grace. And I love that you brought up, the evidence, because we tend to, as human beings and as women, especially like find a lot of evidence to why we're not worthy, right? Why we're not trustworthy, why we can't trust ourselves, why we're not confident, why this won't work out for us, right? And it didn't work before, so it won't work this time. And I love how you're like, let's find evidence of the contrary. Let's find evidence that I am worthy, I am successful, I am a good person, like I am the expert in my space, right?
Absolutely.
And that's out of our comfort zone. So you shared that you have a process that you put people through. Can you share a part of that process or a little bit of that process with us? I'm curious.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. One of the reasons why decisions are so hard is because we're afraid that we are going to miss out on other opportunities, or that the decision we're going to make is not right. My contention and the thought that I offer people, right, is that a decision is a moment in time, right? It's not the end of time. So a decision is a moment in time. It's not the end of time. What that means is two things. First, whatever decision I make, I can change it later if I feel I need to, right? And second, any option that I don't choose is not suddenly going to disappear off into the ether because I didn't select it, right? So I can always go back to that if I need to. The problem is that if we make a decision and we immediately go to, oh, but, right, then that's when we get into trouble. So the process has a lot to do with being scientific rather than being emotional. So my process for decision making looks a lot like a scientific method. Let's establish what the problem is, right? Let's create a hypothesis that starts with a question, an inquiry that we're making. And then once we have all the possible answers to that question, we're going to come up with a hypothesis, and then we're going to get to work in proving that hypothesis right. Because that's what scientists do, right? They have 20 million options of what the answer could be. They just pick one, do the whole experiment with it, look at the data, and then if they need to start over, they do. So that's what decisions is. It's an experiment. And so the way it starts is by defining, okay, what is really what you want to show or prove? What is really the decision about? Because very often we don't even know what the decision we're making is, really. We're like, okay, I want to start a business. Is the decision to start a business or not to start the business? Is the decision what kind of business? Is the decision when do I start the business? There's a bunch of different decisions in there. So let's start by narrowing it down to what the actual decision is. Then let's lay out all the options that we can think of, maybe even do a little bit of research about all the possible options, and ask ourselves the right question. Okay, so if the decision is this the right time to start a business? Okay, what are all the possibilities? What are all the things I need to consider? What are all the possible options? I'll do a little bit of research, and then I'll put it aside for a little bit, and then I'll come back. I will look at it, and immediately some things are going to stand out as not resonating with me, not making sense to me, or really not being feasible at the time for whatever reason, whether it is whatever it might be. Look.
That? Who is that? If you're
That's
listening, you just didn't see what happened. But Marcy just lifted up this cute little, like, oh my gosh, this cute little puppy.
This is Skylar.
Hi, Skylar.
And
Oh, you are adorable. If you're missing this out on the podcast, come to YouTube. Oh, hi, Skylar. Thank you for joining us today.
yeah, she was sitting next to me, and suddenly she left, and now she wanted back. So there she is.
She's like, I want a cameo. You can
Yeah,
join
she
us
always
anytime,
does.
Skylar.
She's a little deep. But anyway, so once you have those eliminated, right? The things that immediately stand out as, nope, there's no way, that's not happening, I'm not doing that. And be careful, because sometimes we eliminate the things that are slightly out of our comfort zone, but that might take us beyond, right? So only eliminate those things that you know are completely, you're not going to even entertain them, right? Then once you get past that elimination stage, anything that's left, it's feasible. It's just a matter of picking the one that you think is going to take you farther, right? And now the new question is not which one do I like best, because we're always going to pick the one that's most comfortable and
Exactly,
therefore
the
keep
easiest
us where
road,
we're
right?
at,
Yeah.
the easiest one, right? So the right question is, which one has the promise of taking me farther faster, or taking me closer to my goal in the most effective way, right? And then I'm going to pick one, and I'm going to set myself a timeline. Okay, I'm going to test this out for the next, I should see results in 6 months. If I don't see results in 6 months, I'm going to reassess and go back and look at the other options and see what I need to tweak, or see if I just need to be more diligent in what I'm doing. Really be honest with myself about the process. But it all starts with removing the emotion out of it by making it an experiment. You're just experimenting with a possibility that you're going to try to prove right. And if it doesn't prove right, you still have all these other options. They never went away.
Yeah, I like that you give them, like, you have a specific process of putting people through, and it's on, like, you can put this on paper, so we can see it, we can go through this process, we can see it, and it's black and white. There's no gray area. And I like that you put a time on it too. Like, when do I reassess this? Because many people will try one thing, and then they'll scratch it, the
It
whole
didn't
thing,
work.
because it didn't work. just because that one thing didn't work doesn't mean that it's not going to work. It means
Mhm,
that, well, okay, what's the next thing I get to try? So by
mhm,
having that time frame, we're not scrapping everything by one thing that just didn't work out. Because, for example, just reaching out to someone, just because it didn't work, they said no at the time, right? No doesn't mean no. It just means not right now. So just because
mhm.
it didn't work out, it doesn't mean your whole idea is out the window. It just means what's the next thing
Correct,
I get to work on to get closer. It's taking you one step closer to your goal. So
correct.
I really like that process. And I learned a lot by that because I loved science growing up, but I am not an analytical person at all. I am a promoting person. I love to have, I like to have you on and promote you. And I am a supporter. I will walk people across the line holding their hand. I say yes to everybody. But when it comes to analyzing and controlling different things, it's just, that's out of my comfort zone. So I like that you put it very specific because I'm emotional. And when
Mhm,
we're emotional, we don't always make the best decisions, right? Because we're
correct.
we're not thinking about the whole picture. So you make it very
Absolutely,
clear cut and simple. I like simple, which that was super simple. Um,
absolutely.
so you have different ways that people, well, first, before I get to that, so you said that your business didn't start off like it is now. So
No.
can you share with us, because that's a great important point, because my business, I was not a business strategy coach when I started coaching. I didn't know anything
Mm-mm,
about business. That grew and developed over years and over time. So
mhm,
I love that yours was similar. So can you share
yeah.
your journey so that people understand, like, just because where you are now doesn't mean, like, be open. It doesn't mean you're locked into it a year or even 5 years from now.
Absolutely. So when I started venturing into this whole entrepreneurial world, I was living in Puerto Rico. I am a native of Puerto Rico, and my first language is Spanish, but I am an English teacher. And so the very first idea I got was there's all these business people in Puerto Rico who want to do business with English speaking people, but their English is not as polished as they would like it to be, or they feel less than confident in their ability to express themselves in English. So my very first business was English for Business. That's literally what it was called, English for Business. And I would help mostly realtors, which is why I ended up speaking with the Realtors Association and working directly with them, but helping them refine their English skills and their communication skills so they could do business in English. But invariably, I found myself being more drawn to helping them work on their level of confidence rather than the language skills themselves. So what I found was that most of the time they knew more than enough to get around all the language hurdles. It was believing in their ability to do it that was getting in the way. So I started working a lot with them on that mindset piece alongside the language. And so then I started thinking, okay, how can I leverage this language piece? And like I said before, my favorite part of teaching was helping kids get past their own hurdles. So I thought, okay, I will start working with academic coaching and I will help my students with the mindset piece and with the mind working around the mind issues, right? So prefrontal cortex issues, executive functioning, all these things. The issue was that I found myself confronting some of the same things that drove me out of teaching or that were driving me out of teaching because I couldn't just work with the kids. I had to work with the parents, I had to work with the teachers, I had to work with all these other adults that were involved in the process that didn't understand where I was coming from. So that was a little bit of a standstill there for a minute. And eventually, through a number of iterations and through helping people and asking people what they really wanted from me, I realized that I could really most help people the most in two areas. Helping them refine their messaging and the way that they present themselves as public speakers. So that's a speaking piece, and leading themselves to the results that they want, getting out of their own way and understanding that they do have the capability of leading whatever kind of life they want to lead. And so that's how I ended up where I'm at today.
It's so good. So I love that, because so many of us, when we're starting a business, so if you're listening and you're wanting to start a business and you're just not knowing where to go, start with what you know. Marcy did that.
Mm.
I did that. Like, start with what you know and
Yep.
understand that action brings clarity. I will say that to the cows come home.
Yep.
And Marcy took action and opportunities open. We
Yeah.
learn as we're doing. So by her, showing up, and by Marcy showing up and doing what she knew and offering those services to people, she realized that they do know what they need to know. It's just that that confidence, that mindset piece was what was missing for them. And she
Yeah,
stepped in and was able to solve that. So we don't know the gap we need to fill yet until we're actually working towards something and doing what we do know in order to find that next step. So
absolutely. And
if
that's
you're,
something I will say, I'm sorry, but
right,
that's something I will say at the beginning. I was so caught up with what is my title going to be, or how am I going to present myself and label myself? And that was the worst waste of time ever, right? So when you're starting, just start. People will let you know what they see you as. People will let you know how you best serve them. Don't let that stop you. Now, if you're clear and you know that what you want to be is a blank, then by all means go for it. But if you're unsure, don't let that stop you. Just start taking the steps, and your audience, your clients, the people that you serve will point you in the right direction.
that's so important and so good, because I've had clients that fall into that same trap. I need to know what my one liner is. I need to know what I'm calling myself. Who am I? And I'm like, what's your name? That's who you are. How do you help people? What's the problem you
Exactly.
solve and the transformation you create? We can work on everything else. Just
Hmm.
start showing up and sharing with people the problem that you solve and how you solve it and what their life looks like on the other side of it, and get in touch with their vision is. Can you get them to their vision? Then share with them that you can and how you can help them. At the end of the day, that's
Absolutely.
where we start. And because at the they're work, they want to work with you because they're buying you.
Hmm.
It's by you showing up, and Marcy showed up as herself authentically and genuinely, and
Yep.
people worked with her. And as she worked with
Yep.
people, she saw a new gap that she got to fill. And that's where, and things evolve. And but we can't
Absolutely.
evolve and grow unless we're taking that first step. So oh, that was so good. So don't get caught up in the stuff. Don't get up and
Mm-mm.
caught up in the how. Don't get it caught up in your title. Don't get it caught up in your one liner. That will all come as you're moving through the process. Just, go out and share
Absolutely.
your message and start showing up. Be seen, be heard, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
empower yourself to do and to do so. And if you are having fear or you don't know your next steps, reach out to Marcy, and let someone else empower you to take those steps. It's very important that we find mentors that we resonate
Absolutely.
with, that can help us move the process forward. Because I find another thing so many entrepreneurs do, Marcy, which I'm sure you see, is they try to lone wolf it, and that just doesn't work either. You stay stuck longer. So speaking
Hmm.
of reaching out to you, how do we find more Marcy?
All right, so I am on pretty much every social media platform except Twitter. For some reason, Twitter has never been my friend, but I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on TikTok, and I'm on Threads too. So you can just search Marcy Amaro, and I'm the only one with the gray hair. So look for the one with the gray hair.
Yeah,
And my
that looks
website.
beautiful on you.
Thank you. My website is Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, Amaro, AMARO.com. So you can head over there and you will see a button to schedule a free 30-minute chat with me where we can talk about what your dreams are, right? What your desire is, what you're looking to accomplish. We will talk about the things that might be getting in the way. And at the end of 30 minutes, you will have at least one actionable step that you can take with you. And then we can talk about whether we can work together further or not. But you will definitely get some value out of those 30 minutes.
See there, if you don't even know what action step to take because you're stuck, Marcy's going to give it to you. So that is
Absolutely.
brilliant. I love it. So all of Marcy's links are inside the show notes in here. So if you missed any of that, just reach out to Marcy, search for Marcy Amaro, and you'll find her, connect with her, follow her. Write Marcy in the DMs. She will write you back. She will connect with
Absolutely.
you. And also check out her website, marcyamaro.com. And again, all the links are in the show notes here if you missed any of that. Marcy, you have events that you host monthly and on a regular basis to help
Mhm.
people for free, right? So can you share or what those events look like and how we can join you?
Oh, absolutely. I host Zoom web classes or master classes, depending on what I'm working on. And I shift them. It's never the same thing. It's not like the same on repeat all the time. So you get new content every time that I host one. And those are usually about every other week. But
Okay.
I also have a Facebook group. It's called the Confident Life Plan. And in there, I host weekly live trainings on topics that will help you move towards greater success, increased communication, and increased self leadership. So you can join join the Confident Life Plan group or be on the lookout on my Facebook profile. I always have the links in my bio to register for whatever the latest masterclass is, or go to marcyamaro.com and you can find more information there as well.
Perfect. So Marcy always has something going on that you can,
Yes.
so you can get more Marcy through her trainings as well. Join the Confident Life Plan Facebook group. It's free to join, and you'll be surrounded by a community of like-minded individuals. And that's another really important piece when you're starting a business, building a business, scaling your business, whatever it is, or just wanting to move to a new goal in your life. It's really important that you're surrounding yourself with people, like-minded individuals who are also working toward their goals as well, so you can support each other. I'm sure you can find a person in there. It could be your accountability partner, which is huge. You've got
Absolutely.
Marcy there supporting you as your mentor as well. So this has
Absolutely.
been such
And
an
if you wanted to just listen, search Sincerely Speaking with Marcy Amaro on all podcasting platforms.
oh
I almost
yeah, and her
forgot to mention that.
podcast. Yeah. Mention that again. What would bring up your podcast again? Because we didn't
It's
talk into
called
that.
Sincerely Speaking with Marcy Amaro, and you can find it on anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can just search Sincerely Speaking with Marcy Amaro and find me. We talk all things success, leadership, and communication. So go check it out.
And Marcy, I was listening to your podcast, and I will personally say it's really incredible. There's so much amazing value inside of there. She has incredible guests on there. So I will second that. Go listen to her podcast, Sincerely Speaking with Marcy Amaro, because it is so, so good. So many gold nuggets, and you're going to learn a lot. So I think it's actually one of my favorite podcasts. I haven't told you that, but it is. I really enjoyed listening to it. We're going to wrap this up, Marcy. Thank you so much for your time today. I know you're a busy lady, and I want to give you your time back, but also for all your expertise, for your inspiration today. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time and your wisdom. Can we end on a fun fact? I always like to talk about a fun fact because we learn about you in the business space, but what's some behind the scenes things about Marcy we wouldn't normally know?
Oh my gosh, I'm such an oddball. I tell my daughters that they have an alien for a mother because I'm so weird in so many different ways. But something that most people would never guess is that I actually used to play the drums.
Did you really?
Yeah.
What kind of music? What genre?
I was a drummer at church, so it was
Oh,
worship music, but I was a drummer for a bit there, and
that's
people are always shocked
amazing.
to find that. They see me like all serious, and I'm not really, but they don't expect that for some reason.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're so beautiful, and you're calm and peaceful, and like when I get around you or people are around you, I'm sure they feel the same. Like we just feel very like at ease and zen. So to see you, to think about you rocking out on some drums, it's just like it's like your Sasha Sheer, your what is that? That Sasha Fierce personality that everybody has their alter ego.
Right?
So that is so good. That is so good. Oh, that's such a fun fact. I had no idea. Thank you for
Yep.
sharing that. So,
Thank you.
well, again, thank you, Marcy, for joining me today. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Be.She podcast. Be seen, be heard, be empowered. Make sure you go follow Marcy. Check out her events. Check out her podcast as well, because you're going to love it as much as I do. And go connect with her. She's a rock star. Thank you,
Oh,
Marcy.
thank you. Thank you. Takes one to know one.
We'll see you all next time on another episode of the Be.She podcast. Go crush it today.